Um, How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Christian, and welcome to Liberty After Dark. After taking off a bye week, just having a little bit of a break, we do that from time to time here, but it was all for a good cause. I sort of got a bug, an itch, you might say, to take on a series. And, I haven't really done a full series per se before, but for a while there, we would focus on, say, like the Middle East for a few weeks, or we would focus on one like cops or something for a few weeks, and it just kind of naturally worked out that way based off of like current events and stuff like that. I do have one big news thing that we need to talk about, but after that, then we're just going to get straight into the meat and potatoes of all of this, which is going to be a conversation about ethics, and we're going to be starting from literally square one. I will give a little bit more backstory on why we're doing this, and then we'll get right into it. I'm not sure exactly how long this episode's going to be. We're just going to kind of talk until everything's been talked about, but today is going to be more of a primer for the weeks to come. I'm not certain how long this will be. This could be something that we kind of off and on pursue depending on what's going on, but we could start maybe do a couple episodes like this, take a couple episodes off, and do some more traditional content, and then come back and do something like this. And maybe I'll do like a supplemental YouTube video to go a little bit more in depth about something I talked about. But regardless, let's do a little bit of news. Kim Jong-un is allegedly dead. This is pretty breaking stuff. But there is a possibility that the Chinese doctors have confirmed Kim Jong-un is dead. I don't want to be too definitive about that statement, because with my luck, he'll walk out of his unicorn cave tomorrow and be perfectly fine. But from what I saw, the man is dead. No promises. He could be alive, but just wanted you guys to know. We will probably definitively know in another day or two whether he's alive or not. But just keep your eyes out for that, because his sister's crazy, and it would be really interesting to see what happens if she got into the power. I don't think it would be any better. I think it would be just as bad, potentially worse, because she's really crazy. But, this is the world we live in. So I figured I would go ahead and give you guys that before we got started. So on to the meat and potatoes of the show. We are going to start a series on a deconstruction of voluntarism. And to be honest, that's not really an accurate way of portraying what we're going to be doing. We're going to be looking at, from square one, ethical principles. From square zero today. We're at square zero right now. We're basically going to take everything that we think we know, and we're going to throw it out the door. And I'm going to try to use the minimal amount of outside information to come to a logical process where we start from nothing and arrive at voluntarism. Because I think something I had a lot of issues with, and I'm probably projecting a little bit here, but something I always had an issue with was like I could accept the fact that it was like, okay, violence is wrong, the state is evil, but how do we get here? Like, what is the actual, not just like, okay, I know these things to be true, but like, what is the logical breakdown of like, let's say someone is using like the categorical imperative as an example. Like, what makes the categorical imperative more ethically sound than some other particular framework of viewing the world, say like a utilitarian perspective or something like that? And I think this could be an enriching experience for all of us, because these are questions I never had answers to. And I still don't have answers to some of them, which is why we're not doing it all today. I am learning just as much as anybody else in the comments or watching these videos will, or listening to the podcast. And I think that's fun. It's actually really fun. We're going to be talking about property here soon. We're going to be talking a lot about property. And I think that the way that we will start to, we're going to touch back on rights. We're going to basically be going over a lot of the things you hear us talk about or hear other voluntarists or yourself talk about all the time, and ask the question why. Like, why is this something we believe? Not just because we think it's right or people had really convincing arguments. Why are those arguments not convincing or are convincing, and are or are not convincing, I suppose. And we will be looking at what builds those arguments up to where they are. So I think I've said we're going to be doing fun ethics things in enough different ways at this point. So we are going to get started with what even is ethics, right? So ethics is a branch of philosophy, is one of the easiest ways of putting it. And philosophy is basically just making a science of knowing things. If we're just boiling these down to very basic terms, that is essentially what we're doing here. We're making almost a science of the pursuit of knowledge, which in itself kind of sounds like self-referential, but maybe it'll make a little more sense as we keep going forward. Ethics, the definition from the Merriam-Webster dictionary, is the discipline dealing with what is good and bad and with what moral duty, or and with moral duty and obligation. Sorry. I'm not a huge fan of this definition, but I think it's satisfactory going forward. I think ethics is simply a evaluation of right and wrongness. And I think that that definition implies that there then must be some kind of binary right and wrong in ethics. But I think that that's an oversimplification of that definition. I'm sure there's some issue with it that someone could point out, but I think it makes for an easily understandable, like, what are we actually doing when we talk about ethics? Like, I think this whole, like, oh, well, we're looking at like moral duty and obligation, like those, that seems redundant almost. If you're just dealing with what is right and what is wrong, moral duty and obligation are just another part of what is right and what is wrong. If you have a moral duty to do something, that would mean that, we'll be getting into a lot more of this stuff, so I don't want to bog down too hard. I really wanted to use today to focus on arguments. And I think this is going to be something that I mess up all the time. But it is very important to understand when someone is making an argument and when they're not. And there's two pieces really of this that are extremely fundamental, and one is more esoteric, right? And we're talking about validity and soundness. So I had some examples that I was going to use to demonstrate validity and soundness in modern terms that people could understand. So to give you an example of a claim that is both valid and sound before we get going, we will say the classic. All men are mortal. Socrates is a man. Therefore, Socrates is immortal. Amortal, not immortal. And that is a very sound and valid argument. What does that even mean? Let's look at an argument that isn't valid first, because I think these are the easiest to see. Let's say coronavirus kills everyone. I have coronavirus. Therefore, I will spontaneously combust. For an argument to not be valid, it logically does not fulfill its own requirements, right? Without some sort of injection of outside information that has been presented as a part of the argument, the statement, I have coronavirus kills a lot of people, I have coronavirus, therefore I will spontaneously combust, is not a valid statement. It is not a valid argument. It fails to be logically coherent in the sense that it would somehow require some sort of injection of external information into that statement. Some kind of context has to be missing from that argument. And that's typically what we consider to be not a good argument. But we'll get into that part later. For an argument to be sound, an argument must be factually correct. So if I said, let's make a valid argument out of coronavirus. If I said coronavirus kills everyone, I have coronavirus, therefore I will die. This is a valid argument based off of the presuppositions of the actual argument that coronavirus kills everyone. I have coronavirus, therefore I will die of coronavirus. That is logically coherent, but it's not sound. So we know that everyone doesn't die from coronavirus. So you can have an argument that is totally logically valid, but just wrong. And soundness is typically just considered what most people would just call wrongness. It's just being wrong. Another unsound argument is like, my car is red, my car is faster than yours, therefore red cars are faster. I mean, sure, in this one example, maybe that car is faster, but it being red is not what makes it faster. It's an unsound argument. And you can have an argument that is both valid and sound, but not good, right? And this is the third spectrum of arguments. Once you have made a sound and valid argument, it then has to be a good argument. So let's do a sound and valid argument. Uh, so uh, coronavirus coronavirus kills people. Quarantines will slow the spread of coronavirus. Therefore, we must shut down the entire country to save people. This is an example of a sound and valid argument that is not necessarily a good one, because just because it is true and it is logically valid does not mean that it therefore is a good idea. There are plenty of other logically valid and sound arguments that you can come up with that wouldn't be a good idea. This is actually the vast majority of what you see. And some of this is a result of the fact that arguments can be manipulated in a way. And that may sound a little silly to someone, or even to myself, actually, when I was first really starting to study the art of the argument, as one might say. But you can cherry pick information to make a sound argument. You can cherry pick the way you word things to make an argument that would normally not be valid appear valid, at least, or seem like it's valid. And you can do both at the same time, which makes for some very, very dangerous arguments. Usually, I think it's easiest for people to see when numbers are being messed with or when soundness is being affected. I think sneakily making invalid arguments is a lot harder for people to see. It's hard to make an example for either. Also, I should say, it's one of those things that it's easiest to see when you after the fact, when you realize what's already happened. And soundness is, I definitely think, easier to check. So like, Al Gore says the sea levels are rising by 0.01 inches per year. If the sea levels rise, eventually all land will be covered in water. Let's pretend that's even sound. I don't even know if that's sound or not. But, and then Al Gore's response is, oh, we must therefore stop burning of all fossil fuels to prevent this. That's actually a terrible argument because that requires external information outside of the argument. So forget I ever said that. See, it's kind of hard to play this game. Soundness is, like, let's say guns kill 100% of all people on planet Earth. You own a gun, therefore you will kill at least one member of the population, you will be responsible for at least one of the deaths or whatever. Some stupid argument like that. It's valid, but it's obvious that it's not correct. Guns don't kill everyone. It's not like they just are like rabid animals that randomly kill things that they touch. And why I think this is important to understand is not so that we can become extremely obnoxious people that just run around saying, that's not an argument. That's not an argument. Not an argument. I think it's important to understand so that we can't be trapped by those people. Excuse me. And because if you want anybody who disagrees with you, who values the pursuit of truth, the truth-seeking act that is, the philosophical and ethical pursuits, I think you have to almost you can't be too casual about it. These people like to take themselves very seriously. I think I try not to. Maybe I'm guilty of this as well. But people who are very passionate about these things, and rightfully so, tend to take their arguments pretty damn seriously. And we can't step into their wheelhouse without playing by their rules. I think that's unfair. And this is not a new game. It's not like they made these rules up to make it harder for us to play basketball with the cool kids. The reason that having sound and valid arguments that are also good and good in the sense that they are applicable and convincing, which I didn't do a good job of explaining, is important going forward. We will be using arguments when we are talking about property. We will be using arguments when we are talking about the fundamentals of reciprocity of rights. We will be talking about arguments when we talk about contracts. And I think, these are all everything in ethics is built off of arguments, because some things you can't just measure and prove, right? No one's going to pull out a ruler and be like, well, here's your property rights, right? You have to unfortunately, we have to convince people that these are things that exist. It's not like they're innate knowledge, and that's the whole point of an argument. Yes, the social aspect of utilizing arguments makes you more clearly able to speak about what you believe and why you believe it, but also, it's all we really have. Um, and again, I don't want this to come off as me saying like you have to be like in a casual conversation with your friends. Oh, that's not an argument, but you should. I think if, especially from someone coming from the inside out of voluntarism, I think it's important that we always hold that standard, whether someone else does, especially if we're trying to push our beliefs to people who may push against them. It doesn't help anyone to come very casually at someone who is interested in hearing the finer points of an argument. And, I am over the whole Facebook wars where I just, you just yell at people on the keyboard and no one's actually talking to each other, and it's all just, oh, look at this graph. Oh, fake news, and, all that crap. It doesn't help anything. I am interested, however, in having healthy dialogues. There's a great video I just saw. I wish I saved the link. And it was Jordan Peterson and some British fellow, I believe, who was interviewing him. And, these people had like basically nothing ideologically in common, but they had a very lucid discussion where they were both freely open to identifying where they agreed with each other and having a very civil dialogue. I think the video is called "How to Healthily Disagree with Someone" or something like that. And it was just like, it was great. I mean, two very intelligent people speaking to each other about some very big issues, and coming to what I felt like was, just another way of saying agree to disagree, but extremely healthily. Like, you could tell they both at least enjoyed it, right? Why why even put yourself in these situations if you don't even get, if not only do you not get anything out of it, but you don't even enjoy it. I think some people do these things just because they like being angry, to be completely honest with you. I do a little bit of that too. I'm not a perfect person by any means, but, and to kind of bring all this full circle, I'm not going to spend too long talking about um, arguments, because I don't think it deserves an entire hour long episode. But I think it's important that we establish these things now, especially while I'm still doing research on some of these. We may not even do another one of these next week. We may just do a normal show next week, but we will for sure be coming back to this as I start to get more of a vision of how this is all going to go. And yeah, I think that it's important to remember what we've talked about so far. It seems really simple. It seems extremely simple. But the next time you make an argument, I want you to ask yourself if it was like valid or sound. And again, I'm not asking you to become super hyper logical stoic person. I make invalid arguments every day. I make unsound arguments every day because in casual spaces it doesn't really matter, right? But just for fun, do yourself a favor and maybe do some reflecting and say, okay, I what was an argument I made? I shouldn't have to do the dishes. I did the dishes yesterday, therefore Sally should do the dishes. Like, is that a valid argument? Is that a sound argument? Does this require some sort of of constant that isn't present inside of the argument? And once you start dissecting things like that, I think you get yourself into the mindset of the philosopher, right? Of the ethicist, as one might say. And getting into that mental framework will definitely help us for the rest of the time that we're on this journey. Um, and so I wanted to keep this little introductory episode pretty light. Um, do just keep this in your mind the next time that we are talking about something, and maybe I'll make an invalid or unsound argument. Maybe you'll make one. Maybe someone I'm talking to will make one, and just start kind of training your brain to see these things in the way you live, in the way you argue, in the way other people do, and again, not to judge, but to learn. Right? I think that's very useful. It's something I've been doing a lot of lately. I mean, I think don't even know how many times I've corrected myself in this one episode for making an unsound or invalid argument or invalid argument. And yeah, I think going forward, this will be a good framework for us to set up. So, just to quickly recap, ethics is the pursuit of truth seeking is in terms of the rightness or wrongness of certain actions. Specific actions, I would even say. I think ethics is a very highly specified field, and that's why there's so many potential. My dog just freaked out on his little bag. He's sleeping on a plastic bag. So many potential hypotheticals when it comes to ethics because ethics is specifically tailored. It's very, very rare that you have one very specific argument that you can just constantly point to without having to kind of mull through it. You know, even like we talk about the nap all the time. The nap in itself is an argument. It's not worded as an argument, but its backing is an argument. Like, I have the right to life. My life is being threatened, therefore I can defend myself. That is the argument of the nap, which requires external information, which is one of the reasons why it's so difficult for people who haven't spent any time studying the nap to understand the nap. And I think this is important too. Our brains are wired to very easily understand self-contained arguments, you know? Very easy to understand that. You can say, I have the right to life. You know, my life is being threatened. Therefore, this can be a valid statement, but it's missing context. Why do you have the right to life? And you know, I almost have this dream that, like, you know, how physicists had this dream of like the universal, like the theory of everything. And it's like the little line that's like, oh, yep, this is all of it right here. This is the equation for all of it. Um, I kind of have like almost that dream of like voluntarist ethics, where it's like this one just paragraph that not even a paragraph, just a couple logical lines that just go through everything. It's like you know, uh, all actions must be universalizable because blah 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 blah, and it just kind of goes all the way down through it until you're like, and that's why you have property rights, and it's all, you know, this little self-contained package. But I guess that's what we call books, right? Books in themselves can just be really extremely long-winded arguments. Not all arguments are these quick little tidbit self-referential things. I feel like I should have said that earlier, and I'm sorry that I didn't. But this is simply one of the easiest ways of getting your mind wrapped around the argument. Um, the more self-contained an argument is, the easier it is to communicate that argument. Once you start getting into, external information and stuff like that, you have to have a lot of subtext to set up your argument. This is why you see a lot of terms definitions in philosophy. It is really important to define your terms, because once the terms are defined, a lot of the external information required to make these arguments is already done. So, like, if we define, I don't know, let's pick something stupid. I define a cup as a vessel that holds water. I don't have to explain, like, oh, this vessel that holds water. I can just say cup. I can just say cup. Or, if I could say, like, a car is a vehicle of like, when we agree that a car means a vehicle of transportation with more than two wheels that goes forward and can carry people. And, if we disagreed on that, that would be an issue, because that would mean the argument that I would be making with my definition of car, whatever stupid argument I would be making that would require that to be defined, is going to be difficult for that person to accept, because they come in with a different set of information. So if you've ever wondered why philosophers or ethicists or any of these people argue about terms a lot, it's because terms essentially become the arguments. If you can't agree on a definition of property, it doesn't matter what your argument is, because you're both saying different things. If I think property means pizza party and you think property means something that you own or is a part of, yourself, what is the phrase, your personhood as your property, with that was self-referential, so that was terrible, but something you own, let's just say that's your definition of property. Then yeah, then my definition and your definition used in the same exact argument would have two completely different meanings. If you say everybody's entitled to property because of XYZ, you would be telling me everybody's entitled to pizza parties. And I'm like, I love pizza parties. You don't have to sell me on that. So, yeah, again, this is all just kind of, I'm more just like tuning in our brains, I guess I could say. This is a very light primer for everything that we're going to be coming up on. And we'll see how deep we go into all this. I kind of want to keep these things consumable. So we will probably, we'll see how things go basically as we press on. But I don't know if we'll be doing very many like hour and a half long lectures on these things. I don't know if that's even like really good at all or consumable. I think it's fun to do longer shows when we're just kind of chatting, but I think, probably like something like we were coming up on, something close to the 30-minute mark of just consumable content where we just can kind of like flex our brains a little bit and talk about some ethical principles and ideas. I think that's a healthy way of doing things. So, yeah, like I was saying, just to quickly wrap up for real this time, an argument can be valid, which means it is logically consistent with itself. It can be sound, which means that it is factually correct. All of the presuppositions of the actual argument are correct. It can be valid and sound, but there's a third criteria, which is how good an argument is. So, good in the sense of this does not mean right or wrong, but how applicable, relevant, and specific the argument is. Typically, the more specific the argument is, it's what's the dang? I think there's a theorem for this, or a razor or something like that. But the more specialized the argument is, the better it typically is at conveying a certain idea. The more generalized you get, the more esoteric ideas can be to come off of. Which is why a lot of times you will have arguments referencing other arguments that are like a higher tier than themselves, or potentially the other way, just to kind of contextualize one another. But these are things that we'll talk about later, so I don't want to worry too much about that. But does anybody have any questions who's in the chat right now? Hopefully I did a pretty good job of explaining this. I felt like I was a little bit all over the place, but not as much as I usually am. So that's good. It looks like that's a no. Cool. So I think that's it for today. I think we're going to call it right there. Your homework assignment is analyze arguments that you see throughout your daily life, whether it's you, yourself, your friend, or yourself, your friends, your family, me, old episodes of the podcast, your favorite YouTuber, doesn't matter. Just put yourself in that frame of mind. Start looking at arguments a little more closely than you probably, or I don't want to be presumptuous, but most likely uh, haven't done to the same degree up until now. So, yeah, I think that's it. I appreciate all of you guys coming out. I hope you enjoyed this slightly more consumable content. Thanks for everybody in the live stream again. I appreciate all my Patreon members. I didn't finish the opening and closing credits. I've been very, very busy with school. Finals are coming up, and I have all of the tests for the end of the semester coming up now. And I still have like 4 more math tests, and we've got a week and a half left of school. So it's been kind of crazy, and I am gonna have summer classes, so it's not gonna stop, but it won't be as bad. I think it'll be roughly the same as it was before. So I'll have more time to focus on these things. But again, appreciate you guys. We have a Facebook page. Check it out. I post updates there. More importantly, we have the community group if you want to get slightly more involved. Make sure you subscribe. Hit the bell icon. That was a big thunderbolt. I don't know if you guys heard that or not, but it sounds like it's about the storm. Make sure you like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, all of that stuff. We're trying to build up the YouTube channel, so we're kind of going away from all the other platforms and just really focusing on YouTube. We have a gaming channel, Liberty After Dark Gaming. I think it's Liberty ADG is the YouTube, I believe. I am so bad. I should know this. I stream there sometimes. We've been doing a lot of Escape from Tarkov streams. So your kids, I think I missed something there. Are you talking about arguments? That would be very funny, honestly. But yeah, it's Liberty AD Gaming is the gaming channel. If you want to go check that out, honestly, that one I just kind of do for fun. I figured I would. Yeah, your kids, lots of arguing. Exactly. Maybe your kids, one of your older kids could really gain something from this. Who knows? Just something to think about. But yeah, I think that's it, guys. We have a Patreon. Throw me $1. We're getting so close to the breaking even club. That's really my goal, especially, now that I'm kind of out on my own and doing my own thing. I would like to break even on this. That would be the best. But yeah, thank you to everybody who is in the Patreon. I will get those ending title screens and stuff like that done with y'all's names on them. I should have done that a long time ago, but it will get done. It'll probably be ready for the next episode, and if it's not, I'm sorry. It'll be ready for the one after that, I promise. All right, that's all I've got. You guys take it easy. Hope you enjoyed. Bye.